Hey, welcome back to the show, everybody. We've got with us real special guest, Alan B. Smith, filmmaker, documentary, Half-Light. You can find it on YouTube. We'll put it up on screen so everybody can see. This one is a really cool documentary. It's really on the esoteric. It covered the story of 12 people. A lot of names, especially if you're in the field, you'll recognize the names of a lot of these people too. And what this does is this covers just all aspects of what people have encountered when paranormal and their lives have intersected. And it was really well done, and just how it went through and just caught every aspect of their story, and just like what these encounters, what these experiences, how they've affected them, what's transpired after the fact. Documentary is a little over an hour long. It's really well done. You can find that on the channel, which we'll talk about. Paranormal Pop is where we're. And so what we'll do is is where I found it. I think you might have another channel, but I'll double check with him. What we'll do is when we get to this, Alan B. Smith, he is next, and we're going to be talking UFO encounters and stuff. This is going to be a lot of fun. Stay tuned right now. Welcome to the Three Beards podcast. My name's Craig, along with Austin and Chris.
Passed to a new generation of Americans born in this century.
Let me out.
I'm afraid that is why I need you. Then live to send the innocent to their death? Is this justice and honor in Massachusetts colony?
All right, Austin. I'm not sure if we're going to have Chris. He said he had a headache today, so I'm just, so we'll find out. So how have you been? I'm on vacation.
I just saw an ad for Applebee's half-price late-night appetizers. The only thing I can think of is it's late-night appetizers. You're probably drinking a lot at that point. The next day, you're probably really regretful what you just did because they looked greasy as fuck. So
oh yeah,
you're probably shit-faced eating a bunch of greasy wings and tacos. The next day, you're like, that was a horrible idea.
You just beat me to it. I was gonna say there's a reason why they're half priced.
Yeah, that's true.
Not because it's the highest quality. Yeah. So what we've got a special guest. It was kind of unannounced, but guess what? Oh, he's back. Mark Eddy's with us tonight. How are you, sir?
Doing well. Looking forward to tonight's show.
Francis is put away. He's got his notes. He's ready to roll. I said at this. Yep, right there. And at this time, like I said, I mentioned we're going to talk about documentary Half-Light. And at this time, let's bring on Alan B. Smith. How are you, sir?
Hey, how are you guys? Thanks for having me.
Hey, yeah, thanks for being on the show. Yeah, that's it's one of those things when you see some of these topics that people, Mark talks about. I'm like, don't threaten me with a good time. Like, I'll bring him on the show to talk about it.
Yeah, so Mark is awesome. Mark's been such a great, connector between, all the people who have shared interests in the paranormal and ufology and other subjects like Shakespeare even. So I really appreciate Mark and everything he does for the community.
The guests appreciate, the quality show you give them. So it's all.
Thanks, I appreciate that.
Win-win situation.
Did I get that right? Was it Paranormal Pop? Is that the YouTube channel?
It is, but
Okay.
I'm actually going to change the name soon.
Okay. So, but it is. I at least got the right one. So
Yeah,
that's where.
I
All right.
wanted to do more than just paranormal all the time. And Paranormal Now, that's fine because I'll just do paranormal stuff in Paranormal Now. But for the YouTube channel, like if I want to pop on and do something completely different, I just was like, if I invite a guest on and, it's about like, I don't know, exercise and the channel's called Paranormal Pop, they may not be so inclined to come on.
And Justin, yes, we are all here for Austin's new porn stash, so that's what, yes.
It's gotta go soon, man. I'm not ready.
Yeah, we're gonna have that available soon for merchandise and stuff.
Because my buddies are in a day class, and they told me it can only be like right here. And I'm like, I'm not rocking a Hitler stash for 8 months. I might as well just shave the whole thing off. So we'll see how it goes.
The ginger Hitler stash. Oh my god.
Yeah, that's not happening.
There are some men that are born to wear beards or stashes, and I'm just not one of them for sure.
Yeah,
I'm with Alan on that one.
Yeah, we're rocking that one, but we got to get that new thing out here. I just want to show before I get to, I inevitably always forget to do this here, so I'm just going to bring this on right now. You can go to his site, paranormalnow.net, and this goes over just any information that you want. Talks about, gives you information on his. If you go over here, the Half-Light film, the blog, his show, and then just the guests that you guys have coming on,
which I need to update.
Okay, so yep,
I'm about 3 months behind on that.
Yeah, that's a good commercial.
Isn't it funny how fast you can just look at it? It's like, oh my god, that's so out of date, and I'd be like, it just feels like I just did it.
Yes, exactly.
And then here's on YouTube. I said, here's a channel, and here is the documentary that we talked about, and it was, like I said, as you watch it, you're gonna recognize some names, that especially if you've paid attention. If you're familiar with the field, there's going to definitely be people that you'll be like, oh, hey, I know exactly who that is. And so that's. No, go ahead.
Oh no, I was just going to say, like, I've just been so lucky to have met some really great people and really smart people in the field of ufology and the paranormal, like Peter Robbins and Cheryl Costa, Kathleen Martin. She's not in this, but there's just the access that you get to have when you do podcasts and live shows is so cool. And then to build relationships with people, and in Half-Light, I mean, these people have really opened up beyond not just their paranormal experiences that they had, but really like very personal, hardships in life that they had to learn how to kind of carry through. And part of the theme of the documentary is how their belief in the paranormal connects to a spiritual underpinning to their own well-being and their recovery and from whatever tragedy they had to go through. So it's, because that came from me, because I was always a fan of Coast to Coast AM for a long time. That was the only exposure I had outside of whatever was on television. And I mean, I was listening to that 4-hour show like every day, on the subway rides, when I got back home from work. I'd listen. I just ate it up constantly, because there was a long period of time where I was just personally struggling with my own personal demons, with just depression and anxiety and addiction. And even though I was up and down struggling through that entire period, because I'm not a religious person, it kind of played a supplemental role, like this idea that there's these huge concepts beyond comprehension that maybe some are totally out there and unbelievable, others more so. But the idea that I really have no idea, in a way, kind of gave me hope, to kind of just don't give up, keep going, because you don't know, like you don't really know any of the answers, and because you don't know, how can you justify giving up? So it was a major psychological play, just my overall stability, well-being, and evolution. So that's where like it came from personally as a film. That was kind of what was pushing me to make it.
What was one of the biggest surprises for you when you did this documentary? Was it some of the people that just opened up? Did they tell more than you expected? Was it something that just like, people just kind of went off script and you're like, oh my God, keep rolling? I mean, what was it during this thing that really blew you away?
I think some of the stories definitely blew me away because you ask questions and you don't really know what the answers are going to be. And all of us, we have a multitude of struggles, hardships that we come across, scary, extreme, whether it be paranormal encounters or just human encounters. And there are a couple of stories, like, I mean, this Brace Hobbs opens up about his losing his sister to a car
Oh, that
accident.
was, yeah.
And I kid you not, and maybe it's because you start getting emotionally kind of detached. Like even right now, I'm literally tearing up thinking about it, because it's just like when you're editing, you're listening to it over and over and over and over and over again. And it's like, man, like he didn't have to share that. He could have shared something different. Because I was asking questions, like that was very direct, and I was trying to explain to each person I was interviewing, this is the general concept that I'm going for. It may not make sense on paper, but this is kind of where I'm going. And they seem to kind of get it. And I think because they understood that the important part of this whole thing was this through thread of spirituality and love. I think that it gave them a little bit more of a sense of safety. And it wouldn't be, I wouldn't abuse their story.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, there's, like I said, the way he broke that down, it was quite compelling. Just did that. I mean, it was kind of like, really, it was quite the dichotomy. I mean, you had the awesome story where he was talking about how you think it's just a movie, a comedy skit where everybody sees something, then they look down to see, they're like, what in the hell was in this drink? When he's talking about his experience, because he's like, you said, he's got a cigarette. The first thing you look at is like, what did I buy? And then he tells that story about the boyfriend and the sister, and it's just like, oh my God, yeah. And, Cheryl's story, about everybody, sudden, family disowns, after the transition, like I said, there's all these ones. And I really thought you really captured, it wasn't the sensational thing. It's like, all right, tell me about the light you saw. What did you do? What did you hear? It really focused on what happens, what happens after the event.
Yeah. And what happens after, and how does it affect you moving forward? How does it change you? Like, how do you recontextualize how you live in reality and behave as a person? Like Geraldine Orozco is like, I mean, she went on a complete shift, like completely just when she dropped, like she was, doing the small business here, this and that. She had unfortunately, lost someone to drug addiction, and her boyfriend or fiance at the time, and then she, around the same time, she starts having these ET encounters, and she just decides to just completely change her focus, and she start do more meditation and try to connect to what she calls like the quantum field, and now she seems to be in a really good place and is successful and happy, and that's amazing. And I know that Ray Hernandez talks about that a lot, regarding the research that Free did, that the majority of experiencers over time, it's like 86% or something like that, begin to see their experience as something that was helpful to them, that was a positive experience, something that they might actually want to experience again, even if at first it was what you and I would call like a traumatic, almost horrific experience, which is kind of an odd thing, because you have to be really careful about that, because there are people out there who have had abduction experiences or experiences with shadow beings or what have you, and they're like, hell no.
Yeah, I don't ever want that. Yeah,
that was bad. I don't want it again. I don't know who they are. No. And I think the thing is, we hear less probably from those people. It's kind of like, generally abduction cases, we guess that there's probably more out there that are not reported. It's kind of like we know that a lot of people who have been raped don't report it. Men who are in abusive relationships won't report it because they're a man. They're not supposed to share that they're being abused by a woman. And so I think that there's plenty of other reports out there that are probably terrifying and that we're not hearing about. And I don't know if I don't know if those research numbers are skewed or not. I know they tried really hard to get a wide range of I guess they had like a series of questions that they gave these experiencers. But overall, and that's what I discovered in this documentary, because I wasn't really sure where it was going to go, was that, yeah, I mean, somehow this has all been almost a spiritual experience for everybody. It's just odd. And I guess you can also say that, like, going into the pits of hell and coming out, right? Like going through the what's the forged through the furnace, right? And coming out a better or stronger person, all like kind of like those myth arcs. You can read into these more horrific abduction stories where, people are just ripped from their home, their clothes are taken off, they're being examined, they're being poked. It's a cold room. There's dead eye aliens looking at them. I mean, this is scary stuff, but there is something about the human experience, is that when we go through really into the abyss and out again, we become a different person. We evolve. I think that it's just, shouldn't that be our choice? So I'm still kind of on the fence in some regard to that experience.
Alan, I have a question. You just mentioned Ray Hernandez, free writings, and the number of people he interviewed. With your commentators on Half-Light, they're from various backgrounds. Are ETs contacting, or ETs, or the paranormal experiences? Are they contacting a wider cross section of the population now?
Well, thank you, Mark. That was the word I was looking for.
More people coming forward? It's just kind of, I was trying to develop something, a theme that you just brought up.
Yeah, cross section was the word I was looking for. Like, how wide of a cross section? How accurate is it? Because if you still have people that are holding out and not sharing their stories, are we missing out on some aspect of this phenomena? I mean, should that number be actually 95% positive, or should it actually be, or should it be 70% positive?
Are we missing some patterns too? If we had a fuller picture of who is being contacted.
Exactly. Yeah. My gut feeling is that there's nothing malicious, but just because something may not be maliciously intended by these exoconscious beings, doesn't mean something doesn't hurt. Doesn't mean it's not a painful or traumatizing experience. We also often hear that analogy of us tagging dolphins or, sea turtles and ripping them out of their environment, putting things in them and then sending them back. For them, it's tragically traumatic, or not tragic, but it's just traumatic. But we're doing it for their own benefit. Is that what's happening to us? Maybe,
Yeah. No, it's, one of those kind of, just before we get too far, like what you guys were talking about just a little bit ago as well, is about the sampling, because we've had Reverend Michael, J.S. Carter on, several times, and he's talked about that one. I mean, the joke where he said, there's a few flies in the buttermilk when you go to these, paranormal things. It's just, and you wonder about that, because some of these cultures, it's not something you talk about. And you think, when you have these things, what are these experiences that we're not hearing? You're not hearing about these things. It's like, you go to some of these conferences, it's not just all, middle-aged white guys that are having paranormal experiences, but that seems to be, like the 80%, 80 to 90% of what's in these, these events. And this isn't the true cross section, because there's, there's the urban, person walking down grocery shopping, looks up like, holy crap, what the hell is that in the sky? It just is like, but we don't ever hear this story because nobody's going to believe somebody that's walking down, they're just going to be like, you saw a helicopter, you saw something.
I'm laughing at the irony of your middle-aged white guys, and I'm looking at our screen right now.
Yeah, exactly. That's what I mean. It's like, if you look at it, it's just white guys that have this experience, and you start to think
it's not true, right?
Yeah.
No, but and I think everyone in that world who like lives in that world, right? Like they're on Facebook talking about these things, they're listening to podcasts and vodcasts, and they're buying books and reading books, going to conferences. Like they get it. But man, like honestly, the History Channel, like I don't know how they do their analytics, like, but they clearly are directing it to a male audience, right? Like it's almost every show is vast majority male. And there was that one episode in Skinwalker Ranch when Linda Moulton Howe came on, and I loved that episode. And she brought like this whole level of experience and intelligence. Like it was just clear on screen. And so I was like, oh, cool. Maybe they're going to bring her more often, right? Like have her as like an occasional, guest on the show. And then that was it. It was like that one-off. And it was just funny because there was a scene where they had one of their not, was it a llama or was it an alpaca? I'm not sure. I think it's alpaca. I think it was, or was it a cattle? Whatever. There was like surrounded by a cage, right? And they were trying to see how it behaved because apparently there was some, UFOs, in the area, and there's some odd behavior. And she was the only one to ask, like, well, what's on top of the cage? Because if you're trying to study this and protect it, what if someone just plucked it out from above? So just like that kind of sort of common sense that, or I should say experienced common sense that comes from someone like her who's looked at cattle mutilation since the 70s. I mean, she's the one that really, broke that story. So I would love to see more people like her on shows.
We wonder because you did the show. I mean, what do you think? Do you think it was editing? I mean, do you think that's why you don't see, and like maybe because you see some of these things like those shows where they'll have like they're clearly like I think it was last year's episode, one episode where they couldn't figure out where the water went. So they dug down, they filled it back up, and the water disappeared again. And then that's the last you heard of it. You're like, you guys didn't even answer this question. It's like you just dug two holes, and then you're just like, well, let's move on to the next problem. You're thinking, where are these people that are like, guys, are we not going to figure out where all this water is going? Or are we just going to, that's just like Linda said, why not keep bringing these people that obviously have something to add to this? But then you went, was it editing? Is it on the editing room floor or what? That's the question.
Yeah, I'm sure budget has a lot to do with it too.
Yeah,
because
Oh, I was just going to quickly interject. The show, the analytics might be geared towards a bunch of guys watching the show before they go to bed, but really people like Linda Moulton Howe or Kathleen Martin are actually women, and they're the actually two of the best commentators on any of this kind of the UFO phenomenon. So I their perspectives should be heard more frequently.
Yeah, it would be great to see. I just think that the History Channel kind of has the majority of that market, and because they do have that corner of the market, they control who they want to cast, So that's just the situation that we're in. But those of us who do these podcasts, we know there's tons of smart, women out there that are investigators, and psychics, and who knows what. So I think one day we'll.
It's I want to, and that was one of the ones like when I watched this thing and we were talking about this, and we actually just naturally got there, and I was going to ask that thing. It's just like how hard was it to get some of these people to open up for the show, or did everybody just kind of like, hey, I'd like to talk to you? Okay, yeah, absolutely. Let me tell you the story. Or did you have to actually try, to convince a couple of people that, no, I'm going to frame this the right way. I'm not going to make you look like an idiot. I want you to tell your story.
Yeah, I guess a little bit. But most of the people, all the people in the documentary I'd already interviewed on Paranormal Now, if not once, more than once. I think at the time the only person I really didn't have much of a relationship with was probably Geraldine and Josie, but a good enough a relationship, a professional relationship up until then, and yeah, and I think that all I had to do was just kind of assure them that this is where I'm trying to go with the story, and then they just opened up, like they just shared, yeah, and I think, especially if you're a researcher, if you are a podcaster, you're kind of already comfortable, I think, with talking a little bit about your own experiences. Maybe not your personal experiences, but I think having been on shows and been asked questions by other people, I think it was just easier for them to do that.
Yeah, and one of the things too, like before I get too far, I was going to ask one of these questions along that same line. What was some of the working titles that you went with the show? I mean, like, did you have a lot of other names, but what got to, Half-Light?
Half-Light was kind of like, because I was looking for something like either not Twilight, but I don't want to use Twilight because that's overused, and there's movies called Twilight and books. Dusk just didn't seem quite right either. But I was trying to go for that feeling at either the beginning of the day or at the end of the day, where you're kind of in between the light and the dark, that space right there, because that's what a lot of these experiences they are. It's like you're having a dark experience, paranormal experience, but there's this other side to the coin that is like an exciting, inspiring side. It stimulates your mind, your spirit, your soul. So I wanted to find that thing that kind of is like, it's both. It's black and white. It's yin and yang. It's a solar eclipse, which is why you see that at the end. So that's why I went with Half-Light. It's an old use of the term. People don't use it anymore, but it's an old word for basically dusk or twilight.
Yeah, so I took it quite right. I was actually taking it as the glass is half full. Like you said, that there's positive out of the thing. And so that's why, so I was close. I'm like, all right. So I was close.
Yeah, I mean, that's the whole point. It's like, it's yin and yang, right? So
yeah. Mm-hmm. No, it was one of those things for me too, just as I'm don't even begin to say that I'm an expert. I mean, I'd probably say within the last 3 years, I really started paying attention, more than just your casual X-Files, fan where you're watching, you like the thing, you want to see the stuff. It's where I've actually started paying more attention, and it's one of the things that you see. It's, I've often wondered, because when I first got into it, I often wondered if a lot of these things was this done intentionally, as part of the distraction. It's like, if you keep people, like you said, you keep these middle-aged white guys all occupied in a conference room, at the Holiday Inn, they're not going to actually look at what's really going on because they're so they're so focused on what we're showing them, here. Like, we're making these encounters where we've seen these aliens, we've done this. That's where I've gone to where now I've come back and I'm like, okay, this seems like this is actually something more than just a grand conspiracy. Just the smoking man with his counsel sitting there puffing away, like, are we gonna mess with Fox Mulder again today? That this is actually something that occurs outside of a grand conspiracy. So like this shows, I really look forward to these kind of discussions about that, because that's, it broadens my take on the whole thing. Because I can't, everybody's got to check this, documentary out. I mean, I'm surprised that it's got as little views as it did on the channel. I was like, I'm hoping that there's other avenues that have seen it, because this is really well done.
Well, the good news is it was like just accepted to be on Tubi, so it'll be there
Okay, good.
soon. I'm not sure when, but it was selected to be on Tubi, and hopefully a little bit further down the line on Amazon, and so I'm in that process right now of getting it up on other platforms. But I didn't want it to, like, it was virtually a no budget. I mean, eventually I spent money, a little bit here for music, a little bit here for graphics, but like it wasn't that much really, other than just like tons of editing hours, because I have a full-time job, and I commute. So it's like for a few months when I was really hardcore editing, I mean, I had just no life, and that's it, because it was a passion project. It's for other people, and I didn't want to like charge or try to rent and make money off of it. And I mean, if the next project I do, we can up it, and I can get some really good equipment, go on site, visit places, and actually spend money to create something, then that would be different. Then I'd, look to monetize it somehow. But this was just, it was in the middle of the pandemic. We were all only connecting like this. Now Camille, she lives in Brooklyn, and, we were in Astoria. So that was easy to go visit her. And then Peter Robbins and Cheryl Costa, we took one trip up north, upstate, and within 24 hours, interviewed both of them. And that was it. And then everybody else was virtual. So it just makes sense to me to get just to share it with people, because I think there are a lot of people out there that when you see these documentaries, for the most part, if you're coming from the outside in, if you're a novice, if you're like, what is this crap? You're coming in and you're seeing these people like talking about real human experiences, not just the paranormal experiences. And you can see how their minds are, they do think rationally, even like race, you're saying kind of like, what's in my cigarette? Like, these are people that do have the mind to go, am I seeing what I'm seeing? Is this really happening? And they're remembering childhood, experiences, and they're not crazy people. So I think that's the message that I want the novice to see, that it's not just one of these documentaries that's like special effects, really cool graphics. We saw a ghost here, or, this is my ET experience. I wanted people to know that experiences are just like them, and you can't do that by limiting, the documentary, by making it a rentable thing or something like that.
Yeah. Alan, you were talking about the human experiences and changes. With the about a dozen commentators that you have, it seems like almost everyone somehow talks about after their experience, there's less of an ego, and they became more empathic.
Yeah. Well, I think that's innate to any paranormal experience, because it's, once you have one, like for me, the closest to a paranormal experience, besides a UFO sighting that I saw when I was a kid, and it was, way out there, it wasn't like a close encounter thing. For me, what I would describe as a paranormal experience was doing mushrooms. And it knocks you to your psychological knees in a kind of a good way, at least for me early on, because the nature of reality is not what you think it is. It's just not. And whether you have an ET encounter, or if you want to call it non-human intelligence or exoconscious encounter, an encounter with a ghost, if you have an encounter with Bigfoot, basically it breaks down whatever paradigm you are currently abiding by. And I think there's humility in that, and I think some people will turn that around and get angry at the world and clench their fist and be like, why did you lie to me? But but most people are lying because they don't know they're lying. Like they're just going
Yeah.
along with reality as we see it around us, and that's it. And then the rules of society are built around that. Um, religion kind of is supposed to cut through that. But one of the problems they have is that, like, oftentimes Christians will kind of have like a come to Jesus moment, or they have a moment where they see the white light, and so to speak, and they feel the presence of the Spirit or God, and that usually just happens on their own. It just kind of happens. Whereas in Buddhism, they're providing you a path. It's not just here's some ways to live by. It's saying do this, or it's transcendentalism. Do this, and then you can connect to this other aspect of reality that's out there. And for me, one of my biggest experiences was, on psilocybin mushrooms doing that. And when you have it, it's kind of hard. It's hard to have an ego. Like we all have egos to some degree, but it's kind of hard to have the A word ego, where you're just mean to people and you think you're better than people.
Yeah.
And I think with all these people in the documentary, that put them on a path, because it's like, okay, so whatever my worries I thought were, I don't think I fully understand them, because I have to recontextualize what the everyday life experiences is based on what I've seen now. Like Tiffany Mack, she had experience where these ETs were, essentially it's like an abduction. She's not really sure how much it was more of an out of body experience, some of them, or whether taken on a ship. Each experience was a little different, but she felt scared and uncomfortable, and she, they said, what's wrong with you? And then they made her feel good. They like passed on this feeling of love, and she felt like they understood her fear and made her feel better. And so an experience like that, I mean, imagine you're having contact with not a human, like some other alien out there that is listening to you and trying to help make you feel better, and can actually connect with you on this level of love, with the big L, whatever that is. It certainly it certainly humbles one. Yeah.
Now, with taking like mushrooms, DMT, when you have these things, so do you feel like this lends more to the fact that this may be more towards the spiritual, other side than actual physical, like crafts coming into our atmosphere and stuff?
Yeah.
Because one of those things, like I said, if you taking mushrooms, that didn't mean that, when I consume these, that suddenly some ET from another planet was like, okay, I got to, you just ring the bell again, I got to go, and just hop in the craft, and show up, because if I don't, they're going to quit believing in me. So that's why I've wondered, because when you see these things, it's like the two, I mean, they can be mutual, connected, but it seems like there's more of an exclusivity to where it's like when I take this and it takes me to another, and it opens my senses, this is either they exist in another plane, another something that you're opening yourself up to, or, and that's what I'll get your take, when I was at what your thoughts were, especially since you just brought in, mushrooms and stuff to it.
Yeah, I think it's all, it's so funny. I've been going back and forth on this for a while, and now I'm definitely in the camp today that it's all interconnected. Because if you, Whitley Strieber, right, the way he describes his experiences, he even openly says, like, it's hard for me to tell sometimes, how much is it like some kind of psychic connection? Like, was he really on board the craft, or, was it sort of another dimension? Was it in like a mind-to-mind experience? And we hear this from other abductees, and Tiffany Mack she has, one experience where it was like definitely on a craft, and another experience where it was like, I don't know. It was kind of like it was like I was in another headspace, another realm. But they were there, they were contacting me. Now, I've never done DMT, but based on my experience in psychedelics, LSD, psilocybin, and what I hear about DMT is, or ayahuasca, is that there are encounters with other conscious beings, and people describe them in different ways. Two themes we tend to hear with DMT is like some kind of abstract geometric type of thing, beings and elves, and somehow they kind of overlap. And that's a very odd thing. And to think that there's an intelligence that's beyond your scope, and it's some kind of like a geometric thing, like maybe you're viewing it in 3 dimensions, but it's actually a 5-dimensional consciousness, or whatever dimensional consciousness. And so the fact that can exist, and an ET experiencer can also have a mind-to-mind abduction or contact, tells me that there's a crossover. Like there, it doesn't have to be one or the other. So if an ET, for instance, can traverse from one dimension to another, then maybe they can go to another, into another, into another. If that's the case, then anything is possible as far as how consciousness exists. And if that's true, then an abduction can be a conscious experience. It could be of the mind, and not necessarily taken on board a craft. Or you can be taken on board a craft and then taken into another dimension. Like there's no way for me to know for sure what it is, but what I think that we definitely need to do is, and people are doing it like free, is try to do as much research on each experience as possible. Try to find as many overlaps as possible and see where that takes us. Because if reality is as slippery as it seems, I mean, these UAPs that we see, they dive into the water and don't splash, or virtually no splash, and then come out of the water again. This is what pilots are seeing, and then all of a sudden, poof, like they'll disappear. That's physics way beyond what we think is even possible. So why can't an ET be, kind of like Luke Skywalker in The Last Jedi? Like why can't an ET be across the galaxy and kind of like project itself into your presence and literally maybe analyze you or talk to you or whatever it is, and you might think you're on a craft, but really you're not. It's these things are so far beyond comprehension. It's so hard to even know where to start,
Yeah, Alan, with what we were just talking about with the possibility of interdimensional travel, and is it this or just the other, and maybe we need to look for a third option. When you're having all these Cheryl and Peter Robbins, Mark D'Antonio talking about their experiences, all 3 of them are the leading names in their topics. Were there answers almost as therapeutic as all the regression stories that hear associated with post-abduction cases?
What they shared in the film, or
Yeah, it was as helpful talking about their experiences as would if psychologist was there regressing
I mean,
them.
that's a really good question, Mark. I'm kind of hesitant to answer what I now am thinking about, because that wasn't my role at all. My role was just to, you know, express their stories and to the best of my understanding.
Oh, that's fair.
But I mean, if it made them feel better, that's awesome. But it wasn't like a therapist kind of, you know, situation. So that didn't, you know, it was just, I asked questions and they shared their story. But I hope that maybe it helped. That would be really cool.
Yeah. No, I was, man, I'm just, there's a lot to unpack on that. I was just like, what's your to tell the story? I mean, I'm still like that story that Mark, you know, that Mark shared about the blood clot, you know, and that was one of those, you know, kind of how it ties in with the mind side of it over, you know, physicality is, you know, was this something, you know, a being coming to him, you know, telepathically? Was it coming to him through, you know, just through some other, because he was in another space, you know, he was in another, you know, because of what was going on through him, communicating to him that way, because obviously there wasn't a physical being standing there in the room communicating with him. And so that's kind of where I was getting at. It's like, does it seem like this stuff, it's not so much that there's a physical, you know, in our dimension, you know, our reality, there's not a physical creature craft here, but this opens up to something where it may actually be here, but you just can't see it unless you actually break down the barriers that we put up, you know, through our normal, however you want to describe it. I mean, that's, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, the interesting thing about that is Mark was in a coma, supposedly had no, you know, active brain activity of consciousness, and then yet he's seeing these things about killing this, you know, shooting down this amorphous object in the sky, and he didn't know when he was unconscious experiencing this that it was a blood clot. So what does that mean? Was that his soul? Because if there was no activity in the brain to indicate that he was, you know, cognitive and processing information, you know, you can read a brain, right, in the dream state, and actually they're able to generate, like, really freakishly, like, some images now, like screenshots from your dreams, you know. So if there's activity, there's activity. If there's not, there's not, and there wasn't. So how was he having this whole visual hallucination, which either saved his life or was a premonition of the blood clot breaking up? That means there has to be a soul. And if that's the case, was it his own soul? Does it have to be a spirit that is actually communicating with you? Because it's like, you hear stories of shamans, of people getting into meditative states, and like they can, or psychics actually, you know, can sense like, oh, there's something wrong in this part of your body. Like you need to go to the doctor and get that checked out, right? So maybe his own soul was kind of, you know, because it was free of the conscious mind, you know, which has its limitations. The soul was out there like, oh, this is what's going on, and just, you know, when he woke up and had that memory, it was like, sometimes it's better to have perhaps an abstraction to help you exercise something like I don't know how the brain would process the soul talking to you, like, oh, by the way, you have a blood clot in your brain and it's blah, blah. Like that wouldn't make sense. Going with something visual that is easy for him to understand, going through that exercise of breaking the amorphous object into pieces, that's kind of beautiful.
Well, and that was one of the things, you know, because we've always talked, you know, guardian angels. You talk this stuff. So is this pretty much just the feeling that we know something's there? It just, most people just can't actually put a faith, you know, can't put an image to it because they haven't gone through these experiences. Because we've basically, you know, I've told the story a couple times, you know, where it's just even myself, you know, I was still worried that I might have crushed the spirit of, you know, my son, even when he's trying to say, hey, Dad, I see this stuff. Oh, knock it off. You don't see anything, you know. When now looking back, it's like, no, I shouldn't have done that. I should have been like, no, explain to me. What did you see? Tell me about it. What did you see? Where I think that's the problem is a lot of us discount these natural abilities that we have. And that was one of the things you talk, that's brought up in this documentary too, is that this is something that I'm trying, the quote's failing me right now. Was it Carl Sagan said that it's the next beautiful, that the quote's going to fail me, where it's just the ability.
Carl Sagan was quoted in this.
Yeah, something about a beautiful ability, something, that's going to be the next one, so these people may have that thing. There's just what you think is a silly thing, not being able to experience. So I said, I'm butchering it bad. I was driving when I was re-listening to it. So I couldn't exactly write it down. And I'm like,
Well, yeah. Well, Mark D'Antonio, he really embraced the idea that what we call the paranormal now is tomorrow's future science, and I think that's a theme that comes up a few times in the documentary, and that's a theme that I want other people to hear, or people who are having these experiences. Maybe it gives them a little bit of encouragement, like, hey, maybe we don't understand this completely yet, but science has proven that mysteries can be solved in the future. And Carl Sagan, I guess his way of saying that is like somewhere something incredible is waiting to be known.
Yeah, that's
it.
Yeah, it's beautiful because it implies that one, we haven't even thought of whatever that thing is yet, or we'll solve something that is a mystery right now that we just don't understand. And that's why I really, really, really encourage people to go out and do your own paranormal inquiries. You don't have to go buying equipment and going into homes and hunting for ghosts. For me, my version of it is doing a podcast or doing a documentary. It's my way of kind of like sifting through all these experience and evidence and trying to figure it out. For some, it's going to be, joining MUFON as a local investigator and going out there and following up on cases. Whatever the path is, you are the future mainstream, because like I use this example, Sutton Hoo, which is still like one of the biggest archaeological finds ever, was in 1938, and they uncovered a tomb. It was a boat. If anyone who's not familiar with it, an Anglo-Saxon boat that was buried under a mound in England, in Suffolk, Sussex or Suffolk, I can't remember now. And Edith Pretty owned this property, and she was for lack of a better word, amateur archaeologist. She wasn't like in the field digging. She was more of a researcher, right? But because of her research, and because she had this property with these mounds on it, she had come to the conclusion that this mound had to have something of archaeological significance in it. And all the mainstream archaeologists from the British Museum and on were like, no, she doesn't know what she's talking about. This is nothing. This is just a natural formation. No biggie. Whatever explanation they came up with, even though now you and I would look at this picture and be like, it's a mound. Why is there a mound there? There must be something under that mound. At the time, they're like, no. There's nothing here, folks. And she was persistent. She was like, there's something here. So she, being a researcher, if I would put her into that category, because I don't know if she actually ever did any digs, she hired an amateur archaeologist who was not he didn't go to school and get his PhD in archaeology, but he was an actual active archaeologist doing digs independently. And they uncovered this extraordinarily historic site. And there was gold treasures, and it was a king's tomb. So
yeah, and it wasn't Suffolk.
It wasn't Suffolk.
Yep. And I showed a picture up here, and there's a couple of things like one of the pieces, this gold belt buckle that was
Yes.
discovered. Yeah.
I was
Yeah,
in
yeah.
Eastern England.
So that's, yeah. So you were correct. Good job. Good job.
Yeah, no, because it's fascinating. It's
Yeah.
that's what I see a lot of us now. Just think about people who've been studying just UFO sightings, right, for a long time, following the documents, looking at video, listening to the sighting stories. They've done extraordinarily preliminary work for people who are now taking the UAP seriously. So you have decades of material now, and even if you never pick up the phone and call Kevin Randall, if the DoD doesn't, reach out to any of the seasoned, ufologists, at least they can pick up their books. At least they can look up, read through evidence and blog posts and interviews. So we've all anyone who's, bringing something to the table or participating in the future discovery of whatever this phenomena is, and that's awesome. And so just like today, the UAP is beginning to become a little bit more mainstream, a little more acceptable. Some other aspect of the phenomena will as well in the future.
And
so
Mark's fast fingers, he found that quote. It was at the 57-minute mark. It was like 57:30, mark in the documentary. So yeah, so
thanks.
Good job on that, Mark. That's got to give him credit for that. Yeah, it was one of those, and as you're doing it, you were talking about what was the commonality that you found between, white, because you did all the editing, so you listened to these stories over and over. Did you find that there was anything that seemed to be a commonality between all 12 of these stories?
Yeah.
Besides UFO, I mean, we'll just throw that one out.
Because not every single story is focused around the UFO.
Yeah, it's like,
and so I mean, I guess most are, but some of the stories are not, UFO related, and it's weird. It's this like this thing about love, and in a way, I kind of directed it that way because I already had that inkling going into it. So a lot of my questions, were leading to that, but I wasn't sure where it was going to go. And when you're doing a documentary, this is my second one. The first one my wife and I did was the Passion Project. Again, it was in 2009 we started that, and that was for the LGBTQ community and equal rights. And we learned that whatever documentary we thought we were going to make, that's not what we made, because you hear things that you don't expect, and it takes you in a new direction. And honestly, like this idea of love, of oneness. Jeremy Norrie, who's generally a skeptical person, and he, I helped co-produce 2 of his documentaries and was interviewed for them as well. He's not necessarily a believer in extraterrestrials or UFOs, but his psychedelic experiences tells him there's something else going on here, and that underlying sense of we're all connected is there. And it's funny how people can get to that same place through different experiences and paths. So to me, that's really, really interesting. So that's what we always have to look for, those commonalities. I think Bud Hopkins, I was listening to an old interview recently, and he made this point that all the abductees that he was, putting through hypnotherapy and hypnoregression, and noting their stories, and he's reading through it, and he realized in all of these alien abduction experiences, there's like zero, at least what he was working on, zero references to the human heart, like the physical organ, which a lot of the debunkers would say what these abduction experiences are having are kind of like a mystic experience, right? Just something within the archetype of the mind, that they're having a sort of religious experience, and so they're always looking for the symbolism. But it's odd that like thousands of of reports, and it's extremely rare to hear about the heart. Like, why do they're always so hyper focused on reproduction, for the vast majority of it? Or they might, someone might say, oh, I was healed, on this part of my body, or, I don't have cancer anymore, or whatever it is. But if this was like a stereotype of a motif that you would see in a mythological story, it's very odd that the heart is not included. And for him, the lack of that inclusion indicated that these are real experiences, that these aren't, the common, religious, ecstasies that sages and others have experienced.
Well, just as you said that, I was wondering, because that's how your documentary, how you really seem to frame it, because it was taking that aspect of where, these stories, because most people, when you think of an alien abduction, the first thing, everybody could say it, 3, 2, 1, anal probe. Everybody's like, talk about these things, where did the alien touch you? Because everybody knows the old adage when it comes to journalism: if it bleeds, it leads.
Mm-hmm.
And that's, you want these things, these things and buzzwords, and like the alien anal probe, and that's what you see on the tabloid thing. Nobody wants to see the alien healed me, took care of my blood clot, and now I found a newfound love for my fellow. That one's just like, that one, throw that one away.
Yeah. Well, that's funny, because if you frame it that way, so that one would sell books, but it won't sell tabloids. It's interesting, right?
Yeah. And that's exactly what it is. And it's just, and with the story, this is the part Michael Carter talks about and stuff. Even though you wake up, you see the insect, looking, alien, it's going to freak you out. But resounding, he didn't have a sense of, fear coming from these things. It was, he felt love, he felt this thing. And that always just kind of leads to me, my logical one where I follow the progression is, why did they choose who they choose to interact with? And that's what's always just been the surprise to me. Is it just because it's just a random, like he happened to be in the right place at the right time, and that's when they're there? Or was it something, is there a commonality? Yeah. Is there something, a genetic trait, something in these things that makes some of these people constantly pick? Because, like, why does that little girl get abducted, dozens and dozens of times, where somebody else is like, no, I've never seen a thing.
Well, yeah, Kathleen Martin's family had been contacted. Kathleen, Betty, and Kathleen's mom.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, their whole family had seen UFOs, and their abduction experiences, including Kathleen. So it seems to be familial, very often, that it's they're following the bloodline, if you will. And to me, that means that there is this very physical component to it, because you were asking earlier, about like the different types of experiences, and so it's like, how can it be some bizarre interdimensional or spiritual experience if they're taking blood, or creating hybrids? The documentary doesn't really focus on that as much, because other documentaries do that, and it's not where I wanted to put the focus. But yes, the bloodline thing's a little creepy, because it's like, all right, so one, why do they need to create hybrids? You keep hearing these theories like, oh, our species is dying. I'm like, if you're so genetically advanced, so scientifically advanced in the form of genetics, it seems to me like you would find another way to fix that. If your species interbred for too long, and like, I'm sure you can find your way out of that. So I'm not really sure, how the theory of like their gene degradation makes sense to me. It sounds to me like a science class, and it's a science class with a mission. and they're kind of experimenting with us, but they're also, if they're going to experiment on us, they're trying to help us. It's kind of like when you volunteer for a trial run on some kind of drug or therapy. Like, the idea is the drug is supposed to work and be helpful, but it could have negative side effects too. So I kind of feel like we're part of they're helping us, but we're also part of a trial run to see how things work out.
Yeah, that makes sense, because that's just always been, like I said, as I've been getting more into more in this, is just the thing that's fascinated me is just who and why people get picked, it just for these things, because it's really, I guess it's just anything. It's like, why does a tornado destroy the house across the street? But the one, the other one, it's like it's missing 2 shingles.
Yeah.
And it could just be the same thing. It could have been, going along, and it's like, what, like you said, you've got some little, like a reader. It's like, boom, oh, hey, that's a match. So this, out goes Bob out his bedroom window, sucked right up into the UFO, takes off. You're like, why'd Bob get picked? I have no idea.
Well, according to Les Velez, who's been studying this for a long time, I guess 30 years now, he thinks we've all been abducted and we just don't know it.
Really?
Yeah. He thinks that that's quite possibly the truth.
And that, I mean, I guess, in a way, it's humbling in the fact that, in the way that almost makes it feel like we've all been like cattle tagged. In a way, it's like if we've all been abducted, and it's like we're all marked, in some way. But at the same time, it's just, I'm just thinking of the sheer, 7.5 billion people.
Well,
that is a massive undertaking. I mean, just for anything, it's like, right. This is Santa Claus and Christmas night thing. I'm like, 7.5 billion people,
and growing.
Yeah.
Craig, from the the opening of the book of Jeremiah, that God says, "I knew you before you were born." Mm-hmm. So if we're going with the Bible as accurate, the Word of God, there's
or a metaphor for
that we've all been abducted, like Les said.
Well, could even be that one. It's like a one when it just take thought experiment. It's like, what if just not so much like a physical. It's like if it's the same thing, like genetic markers. It's like we've all been there's some like trace thing, and we've all, and it's like that random, like anybody that does an experiment, you don't test every single thing. You pull random, just it's literally a random thing. It's just you go to sample something, you see a bottle on the line. Well, we're going to pull this one off, pour it out. We're going to test this, we're going to do all the tests on this one, see if it's fine, great. The line's going to keep going. Well, we'll use Bob again. Well, that's the Bob that never returned because he got pulled off the line. It's like, we don't know what happened to Bob. He was the one that's gone, but the rest of us are just like, yeah, now I just got this dot, over here, it's like, feels funny every time it gets stormy outside. And that's just one of those things. It's like, that's the markers, but then the rest of us, nothing. It's like, I personally, I don't know of any marks. I don't really think of, unless it's subconsciously, I don't know of any stories other than.
Have you had any experiences at all, paranormal?
Just shadow people.
Oh, really? Oh.
Yeah, I've told this a few times. My son's seen it in a couple of locations, so I made him a talisman, from rock in the ocean, and he hasn't seen it since. But I've seen it in my bedroom, where I liken to about probably a 4.5, maybe 5 foot tall, and it's just like Whitley Strieber communion. You see it, and I see this dark shadow like start to appear behind the wall, and then as soon as I snap, I see it whip back. I hop out of bed, and it's gone. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
So I know it's not somebody in the house, and that's happened a couple times. And it's the same thing where it's that same like communion thing, just all of a sudden just peers out from behind the wall and then snaps back.
Right. I think we like again, it's going to take us a really long time, I think, to wrap our heads around it. But imagine, so you have this being that's popping in and out of reality in your space, or you're abducted by aliens and you get some piece of, metal taken out of your skin, only to find out it's a crystalline structure and in a way that's, never been seen before on Earth. Either of those experiences, what if they seem, it's kind of like Alice in Wonderland. Like they seem like they're physical and are not at the same time. And that there are these other just far more complex intelligences behind all of those experiences that are kind of creating these avatars, in a sense, to come in to our dimension and do what they're doing for whatever reason. So if you have an experience and you contact the divine or some other abstract consciousness, maybe that's what's behind all of this, and we're just trying to figure it out. But it's not just some race that was born on a planet in Zeta Reticuli traveling all the way over here and doing things to us. Maybe it's something much bigger than that.
Yeah, I can definitely see that myself, because I just, for the longest time, I've felt there's a lot of commonality between what you read in scripture, what you read, science, that, because I've become more agnostic as I've done my research. I go through these to where I honestly feel the majority of it is, this is all allegory. This is a simple thing, because going through life, thou shalt not steal. This isn't a mutually exclusive thing to this one dogma. This is clearly a life, a way everybody should live their life. This isn't, And so I've found, like, these stories, like Mark brought up, Jeremiah, these things. What if these are all talking about the same thing, but it's one of these things, and some of these encounters are trying to get us past these simple barriers that we keep putting up to me, where, no, you see the symbol on my wall? No, that's the only symbol that, that way is the only way that works. And it's,
I think that a lot of this contact is, I think it's purposeful. It's definitely purposeful. And like I used to have this dream, I had it once or twice, and it was like this one time I remember seeing like a gray alien kind of a thing in the dream, and then a symbol. And when I woke up, like I was compelled to draw this symbol, and it was basically like a triangle within a circle, and then shades of yellow and blue, and I think a little red, but I can't remember. And then I saw this very almost identical symbol at Alex Gray, who's a painter, at his gallery in New York City. And he's, a psychonaut, right? Like he, does psychedelics, and then he paints what he sees. And so I'm thinking, that's so bizarre that I'm having this dream about aliens, which are supposed to be physical. I'm kind of getting this like subconscious message about the symbol and somehow it's important. And then I see it in an art gallery by someone who's having
something
psychedelic experiences. Right.
Looking down at your drink again.
You got to put those mushrooms down.
Yeah, it's like, whoa, what was in that? Yeah, I'm just blown away. When you see, it's like, to stop you there, just think that, what went through your head when you saw that? I mean, just like honest reaction. I mean, here's something you've been dreaming about, and now you physically see it from somebody you're not even related to. Just boom, right there on canvas.
I kind of forgot where I was going. So like the point is that it's intentional. I really believe these things are intentional, because it's a way of kind of tapping you on the shoulder. And that kind of just weird, almost eerie feeling you get when you're in that like liminal experience where you're not really sure what's going on, but something special is happening. It's like almost like a tingling that kind of comes over your body, and it's like, whoa, like I need to pay attention, and get my mind on something that's a little more subtle, but always there. And that's why I think these alien experiences are doing the same thing. And Heidi Hollis, who was a friend, she started the talk about shadow people, and I'm beginning to disagree maybe a little bit on whether these things are actually evil or not. Or are they tapping us on the shoulder? Are they doing the same thing in a different way? And little by little, just tapping humans on the shoulder, like, hey, there's a little bit more here.
I can agree with that. Yeah.
Don't get caught up in all this materialism and what have you. Like, there's something deeper here to understand. Put your focus there. Religious people, sages, and mystics have been saying that forever. People who saw elves in the woods, maybe they're eating muscaria mushrooms, I don't know, but there always seem to be these elementals or interlopers from somewhere else that just give us little nudges and reminders. Why would they only give us nudges and reminders? Why do they say, hey, look up a little bit, and not just reveal yourself and game over? I don't know. And I've never been a fan of like the whole idea that God knows everything, but he's just not going to tell you. Like you gotta suffer through all this to figure it out. And I've just never been a fan of that, because it's the struggle of fate. Like, how do you know everything that's going to happen, but then you still have free will? I think what the Bible is trying to say is kind of like, if we imagine time as not being linear, then all things are happening at the same time. The past, the future, and the present. It's almost impossible to kind of wrap your brain around. And I think that was the Bible's way of trying to explain that. Because I'm sure there was some prophet or mystic who had that experience and was trying to explain it, and was like, God knows everything, but you still have free will. And I think there's a lot of confusion there. But okay, so let's say that's the case. Then why only nudges? I don't know. But I'm kind of comfortable with not knowing. Not because I think there's a singular grand purpose, but it's almost like someone trying to give you a little bit of like a layup, an assist. They're playing their part to the best that they think that they can play, to help the human beings. That's what I'd like to think.
Yeah, no, I like that, because there's always been prescribed the unknown. There's always fear involved. That doesn't then translate. You can't naturally progress to, I'm afraid, I see it, I'm afraid of it, so therefore it's evil. Well, that's not how that works.
Mm-hmm. Well, what? Just the other day, I was in the backyard, and we've been living in the city for so long, even though I grew up in the woods and near the beach. So it's not like I'm just born and raised in the city, but it's been a while since I've lived the more rural life. And I'm in the backyard, and I'm picking up sticks because it was really windy, and I had to mow the lawn. And as I'm going to bend over, pick up a stick, I see a snake like go right past me, and it was pretty big, right through the grass. My first reaction was to jump back, just out of instinct. Like, so I had that moment of fear because it's a snake, and then a second later, I'm like, oh, it's just a big gardener snake, garden snake, no big deal. But my instinct was to be afraid, and so because that's just how we're built. We're built to self-preserve. It makes sense. If I see a scorpion, I'm not going to be like, oh, how cute, and give it a little pet. I'm going to back away. So I think that's what happens with the paranormal experience too. It's the same thing. A snake doesn't necessarily mean it's going to bite you or it's dangerous in any way. And that could be true, possibly. I don't want to speak for other people with shadow people. Now, there are people that do believe that, like AJ Rasmussen, which is interesting in the documentary, because when I was talking to her, you'll notice as she's explaining her shadow person experience as a child, she wasn't afraid.
Yeah. Well, that's
and then when she was older, she was told shadow people are bad. So her understanding of what shadow people are supposed to be changed. But her initial instinct when she was younger was like, they're not bad. They're just there to feed on my negative energy. But just because a shadow person is creepy and is nearby, if you're going through something bad, does that mean that they're there to hurt you? And does that really mean they're actually, a vampire? Or maybe it's a shadow of something within another dimension that's looking at you and watching over you, and we're just misunderstanding it.
Yeah, well, it'd be like the four of us interacting with somebody. Well, this fifth person comes up as a serial killer. That doesn't mean that all of us are this thing. And that's why I look at these things to where, like, even like shadow people, if these are an actual being that's visiting, that doesn't mean just because I see a shadow person that it's inherently negative, that it has this malicious intent. It could be that, 9 out of 10, perfectly fine. They're there to help, watch, they're doing this stuff. Whereas that one, is going to be the one that's there because, I'm going to mess with this person. I'm going to peer up behind the wall because I want to screw with Craig today.
Yeah. And I'm trying to be very careful with my words but I can only kind of speak for myself. When you're in a really depressed state of mind, the way I describe it was, it's like there's a darkness over you. It's like there's a shadow, and everything's it could be physically vivid, but internally grayed. And so it's like you just feel like there's this thing over you all the time, and you do interpret things going on around you in a more negative way. And you can get into the why me? Why is this happening to me? Why do I keep effing up? Like all these things are going through your mind. And so if when I was in one of those states, if I had seen some kind of shadow thing appear every time I'm feeling really bad, I might start thinking like, oh my God, this thing is the problem. But just because it's appearing, it doesn't necessarily mean it is the problem. That just might be the state of mind I'm in to think that. But again, I don't want to speak for anyone else who has their own, own truth.
I just looked up at the time. Holy God, sorry, an hour and 21 minutes. Jeez.
That's why I love talking about this. Like, you could it's so much fun week after week, show after show. It's great. Yeah.
Well, go ahead, Mark.
No, I was just going to say, Alan presented a lot of terrific ideas that the chat room is resonating with.
Oh, yeah.
Oh, thanks. I actually haven't been watching the chat. But I did see something pop up on the screen about orange mushrooms and cow patty. I'm curious about that. What happened later?
Yeah. Well, I wasn't going to say anything while we were talking. I was like, but it's just, does anybody just wonder? It's like, why you're just walking around, you're like, hey, that looks like a mushroom, and just start chewing on it. I'm like,
but that's actually what hunter-gatherers used to do.
Yeah, well,
and that's how I'm sure that's how we accidentally. It's a theory, but I'm sure that's how we accidentally came across psychedelic mushrooms.
Just like using Bob's name, but isn't that what there's a joke thing? It's like how we discover this. Walked up. This one tastes like steak. Bob's dead, and this one's making me, trip balls. It's like that's how we figure out which one worked.
Yeah, same thing with herbs, right? Like you probably pick and you just take a little bite. Like, okay, nothing happened. I'll take a little bit more, and that's how people learned.
Yeah. No, I wanted to. It's like you guys can find them on Facebook here. We're going to plug you like crazy here. I'm going to get you the thing.
Thanks, man. I appreciate that.
Oh yeah, absolutely. Let me get the stuff up here on screen. So you got, it says website paranormalnow.net site right here. You can reach out to him, listen to his show, Paranormal Now. Tomorrow night. There you go.
Tomorrow night. Yep.
That's because you're live Thursdays at 9 p.m. Eastern time, 6 p.m. Pacific time on that channel. Also, now do you go live both? On on YouTube as well?
Yeah. For Paranormal Now, I go live on YouTube. I paused Coffee and UFOs, which is a pre-recorded podcast. But Paranormal Now is the regular. It's the staple. Every week we go live. And then Coffee UFOs it's just more free form. I do much shorter conversations with people. It's more lighthearted as well.
Who's your guest tomorrow night?
Tomorrow night we got Jason Guillemette and Louis Burgess, and they will be talking about ufology. It'll be a UAP UFO heavy night tomorrow night.
All right. Nice.
I'll be there.
All right. Yeah. Thanks, Mark. I really appreciate when you pop in and hang out.
Check that. So we're going to highlight here, Jeff. Instagram, you can follow them, Paranormal Now. Also highlight the Half-Light film there. You can go to Facebook, Paranormal Now. Twitter, paranormal_now. And obviously we talked about paranormalnow.net is the site right there. Plus Paranormal Pop, while it's still called that, it will soon be rebranded, apparently. We just found out it's
there tonight.
There we go. So, but right now, if you go subscribe, it's Paranormal Pop. We'll try to update what it is current, at the later part. But I do recommend the documentary.
Thank you so much. Yeah, I was going to say if anybody does watch it and they like it, please share it. Wherever, Facebook, social media, and please comment down below too, because I'm curious to see. Your reactions and what your take is on it, because eventually I would like to do a follow-up on it and expand it and go a little bit deeper, so that your comments and feedback could help kind of guide where I need to go in that direction. That probably 2 or 3 years from now, but every little bit of feedback helps.
And you commented right there, the cow patty mushrooms weren't very strong. They just caused wavy trees and tracers from the moonlight. Okay, yeah, sounds like a low dose. Yeah. Yeah. So Bob survived that encounter. So there we go.
I'm really glad.
That's what. Oh my God. Yeah. So that's so everybody, please, go subscribe. Like you said, watch this. All kidding aside, go watch this one. It's really good documentary. It actually passed the time a lot. We traveled over to the coast. And so I had about an hour and 15 minutes to kill. So I listened to it again as I was going. Watching it while driving is not a good idea. Don't do it. Just listen. Just listen to it.
I have to be careful. In my car sometimes, like I'll play YouTube just to listen to when I'm driving. I have to be really careful that I don't look over too much.
I know. Well, what I'll do is to solve that urge for anybody, a little life hack. You take your, especially when it's during the daytime, you take the light part of your phone and you turn it all the way down to dark. And so then you can barely see it. So, but then when somebody tries to call you, you can't see it, and that's frustrating as hell. So that is, like you said, you gotta take the good with the bad on that one. But it was really good traveling companion. So
awesome. Did you like the music? Did you catch September?
Yeah, that was really good.
Yeah, those guys are Michael 8 is he's a really nice guy and very talented musician.
Yeah, and I think it's on there too. I'm trying to remember where it's at here, if I can get their name. The Septembrio. Septembrio.com is where you can go. Septembrio.com and find them there for that. So give them a plug as well. But Alan, really appreciate you coming on the show, man. That was a lot of fun. So let us know when the next one comes out, because I don't want you to say what it's about now, because then the competition jumps on you, and then you have 5 or 6 copycats that are trying to do the same thing right away. So
you just have an open invite to come back.
Thanks, guys. I appreciate it.
Yeah, really appreciate it. So, well, thank you. So have a great night. Get back to the family there. And like I said, thanks again.
All right, you guys. I love Three Beards. I appreciate it. Have a good night to everybody listening.
Hey, appreciate that very much. This episode is brought to you by ourselves, threebeerspodcast.com. If you'd like to have your name right here, you can just do that for the low price. No, we would appreciate any sponsorship. So you can go to patreon.com. You could support us. You could support us there as well. That's where we have, and we also, you can go to redbubble.com /3beards podcast. That's where we can have our merchandise. You can also get to that through our website, threebeardspodcast.com. Go to the gear merchandise area, and that links you right with there. I'm going to update have the new design too, with ginger porn stash in the center. So that way, since he doesn't have the beard anymore, so we got to have the ginger porn stash up there. So that's a really cool look. I mean, if you look at the logo on the screen, you see where it's black above the beard. That's kind of what it looks like if you just reverted the images and turned it to orange. That's kind of what it looks like. So we're rebroadcast every night on Wednesday night on ERRT Radio, starting 11 p.m. ish. Courtesy of Ron over there. We really appreciate that. Just want to thank everybody for watching, all those that have supported us through the stars with Facebook. That really helps us as well. That we appreciate anything on there. Patreon, like I said, we do have a one beardo, Laura Lehman Porter. Thank you again for that. We really appreciate that. But just everybody, thank you for watching. So we're going to see you next week. Like I said, go support Alan B. Smith and his documentary. Show him the love for that one. But everybody, thank you for watching. Good night now.